My name is Jamie Foxx, and what I'm about to share with you is the story of how everything I thought I knew about life, about myself, and about faith was shattered and rebuilt in a single, harrowing moment. This isn't just a tale of survival, it's about transformation, about finding clarity in chaos, and about the ways God has a plan, even when it feels like the world is falling apart. It happened in March 2022. My life had always been a whirlwind, a blur of lights, cameras, music, and laughter. I was Jamie Foxx. After all, the actor, the comedian, the musician. I lived for the applause, for the moments on stage or in front of the camera where I could make people feel something. But beneath all that success was a man who rarely slowed down, who rarely stopped to think about what it all meant. Then, out of nowhere, life forced me to stop. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith. I had a medical emergency. A brain bleed that came without warning, like a thief in the night. One moment, I was fine, at least I thought I was, in the next, I was fighting for my life. Doctors said my vitals were plummeting, my body shutting down. They told my family to prepare for the worst. I don't remember much from the first few moments. It's like the curtain came down suddenly, leaving me in the dark. But what I do remember is waking up somewhere else. It wasn't like the hospital or anywhere I'd ever been before. It felt like stepping out of my life and into a strange, quiet in-between space. From the outside, the hospital was buzzing with panic. Doctors and nurses scrambled to save me, their voices tense, their movements hurried. But I couldn't hear them. I couldn't feel my body. All I knew was that I was in a place that didn't feel like Earth. A place where time seemed to stop and everything I thought I knew about existence started to unravel. I didn't see the stereotypical bright light everyone talks about. But there was a tunnel. And, let me tell you, it wasn't the peaceful, glowing path you hear about in stories. It was hot. Real hot. I even remember thinking, am I heading to the wrong place? Did I mess up that bad? I started questioning everything. My life. My choices. My ego. Was this where it all led? And then it got quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty, but a stillness that made me feel small. Like I was standing in the presence of something far greater than myself. It wasn't terrifying, though. It was humbling. It was like being in the audience for the greatest performance ever. Except this time, I wasn't the star. I was just me. That's when I felt the presence of something or someone I couldn't see but knew was there. It wasn't like meeting a person, it was more like being wrapped in an energy so overwhelming that it made me want to cry and laugh at the same time. This presence wasn't angry or cold. It wasn't there to judge me. It was calm, understanding, and vast in a way I can't fully explain. I didn't know what was happening, but I felt this overwhelming sense of clarity. I knew, deep down, that I was standing at some kind of threshold. I wasn't just Jamie Foxx, the actor or the musician. I wasn't my career or my fame. I was just a soul, fragile, finite, and yet somehow part of something infinite. That presence didn't speak, but I felt it. It asked questions, not with words but with emotions that struck me like waves. Why are you here? What have you done with the time you were given? Do you understand the weight of your choices? The questions weren't accusatory, they were compassionate but unyielding, as if giving me a chance to look at myself in a way I never had before. And I couldn't hide. Not from this. Not from myself. Meanwhile, back in the hospital, my youngest daughter was fighting her own battle. She didn't want to see me like that, hooked up to machines, teetering on the edge of death. But she refused to leave my side. She snuck into my room with her guitar, something she hadn't played in years, and started strumming softly. She said she knew what I needed, and she wasn't wrong. As she played, my vitals, those numbers the doctors said were too far gone to recover, began to stabilize. The nurses at the station noticed it first, rushing into the room, baffled by what they saw. But my daughter? She wasn't surprised. "I got him," she said, her voice steady, her faith unshaken. It was God in the guitar. In that moment, as her music filled the room, I felt it too. The presence that had been with me in that strange, quiet place was here now, moving through her hands, through the strings of that guitar. It wasn't a miracle like in the movies. It was raw, real, and undeniably divine. I didn't fully understand what was happening then, and I still don't. But I know this, that presence, that moment, wasn't just about saving my life. It was about showing me the parts of myself I'd ignored, the ego I'd let get in the way, the purpose I'd forgotten. It was about reminding me that I wasn't in control, no matter how much I wanted to be. As I lay there, hovering between life and death, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: surrender. Not defeat, but a willingness to let go, to trust in something greater than myself. And in that surrender, I found the strength to fight, to come back to the world I thought I'd left behind. When I came to, I wasn't fully back in my body, but I wasn't entirely gone either. It felt like I was straddling two worlds: the sterile stillness of the hospital room and that infinite, quiet space where the presence had met me. My mind felt foggy, but my soul was sharp, alive, like it had been jolted awake after years of sleepwalking through life. I still couldn't see the presence, but I could feel it calm, unshakable, and vast. It was more than just a presence. It felt like the very essence of truth, love, and creation all at once. I didn't need to speak for it to understand me. Somehow, it already knew everything I was thinking, feeling, and fearing. The presence didn't judge me. It didn't scold me for the mistakes I'd made or the ego I'd let run unchecked. Instead, it gently pulled back the curtain, showing me my life not as I had seen it, but as it truly was. The first thing I saw was my own reflection, not the physical Jamie Foxx, the one people recognized on the red carpet, but the core of who I was, stripped of fame, talent, and achievements. I was faced with the raw truth of myself, and it wasn't always pretty. I saw the times I let my ego take control, the moments when I chose my own pride over connection. I saw myself brushing past people, too busy or too self-important to notice the needs of those around me. But it wasn't just the bad. The presence showed me the good. To the times I had made someone laugh on their darkest day, the times I'd offered a hand to someone who needed it. It wasn't a movie reel of my life, it was deeper than that. I wasn't just watching these moments, I was feeling them. Every smile I'd given, every wound I'd inflicted, every ripple of my actions echoed back at me, and I felt them as if they were my own. One memory stood out, a day I'd long forgotten. When I was just starting out in my career, I'd been at a diner, rehearsing lines under my breath, too focused to notice the waitress who had been quietly waiting for me to acknowledge her. When she finally got my attention, I snapped at her. I didn't even remember her face. But now, in this moment, I felt her pain like it was my own. The presence wasn't showing me these moments to punish me. It was showing me to teach me. Every action, no matter how small, mattered. Every choice rippled outward, touching lives in ways I couldn't see. It was humbling, overwhelming, and yet deeply loving. The presence didn't want me to feel guilt. It wanted me to understand. And then the presence spoke not with words, but with a knowing that filled every part of me. "You're not supposed to be here yet," it said. "There's more for you to do." I wanted to argue, to tell it I wasn't ready to go back, that I needed more time here, in this space of clarity and peace. But the presence continued, showing me not just the life I had lived, but the life I still had ahead of me. I saw my daughter. She was older, standing on a stage with me, her guitar in hand. She wasn't scared or unsure, she was radiant, confident, a reflection of everything I had always hoped she would be. I saw the people I had yet to meet, the lives I had yet to touch. I saw laughter, tears, struggles, and triumphs, all of it waiting for me, if I chose to return. But the presence wasn't finished. It shifted, showing me something deeper. It wasn't just about my life or my choices. It was about the bigger picture, the interconnectedness of it all. I saw how my actions weren't isolated, they were threads in a vast tapestry, woven together with the lives of everyone around me. One moment stood out. A time I'd complimented a young musician after a performance, telling him he had a gift. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. But now, I saw how those simple words had ignited something in him, giving him the confidence to keep pursuing his passion. That passion would lead him to write songs that would comfort countless others. My small act of kindness had rippled out into the world in ways I could never have imagined. The presence didn't just show me the good. It showed me the ways I had caused harm. 2. A harsh word spoken in anger. A moment of selfishness. A time I chose my pride over love. But it wasn't showing me to shame me. It was showing me to teach me that everything matters, that every choice has weight. As I absorbed all of this, I felt an overwhelming sense of love. Not the conditional love I had known in the world, but something infinite, all-encompassing. It wasn't a reward or a bribe. It was simply there, a constant truth that existed whether I deserved it or not. And then came the most profound truth of all: pain wasn't a punishment. It was a teacher. The presence showed me how my struggles, the moments I had cursed, questioned, and fought against, had shaped me, refined me, and prepared me for this moment. Without them, I wouldn't have been ready to carry the truths I was being shown. Finally, the presence asked me the question that would define the rest of my journey: will you return? It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a plea. It was a choice. I could stay here, in this place of peace and clarity, or I could go back to the chaos of the world, carrying the truths I had been given. I hesitated. The peace here was intoxicating, unlike anything I had ever known. But then I thought of my daughter, of the vision of her on that stage. I thought of the people I could still help, the lives I could still touch. "I'll go back," I said, not with words, but with the deepest part of my being. The presence didn't argue or celebrate. It simply embraced me with a love so vast it felt like it could fill the universe. And then, slowly, the light began to fade, and I felt myself being pulled back, my body waiting for me on the other side. When I opened my eyes, the world felt strange, sharp, overwhelming, and distant, like I was a visitor in my own body. Bright lights seared my vision, and the sound of machines beeping filled the room. My chest heaved as I gasped for air, my lungs struggling to catch up with my return. For a moment, I wasn't sure where I was or if I had truly come back. "Jamie?" The voice was familiar, trembling with emotion. I turned my head slowly, and there she was, my daughter. Tears streaked her face as she leaned over me, her hand gripping mine like a lifeline. "You're back, Dad. You're alive. Alive." The word struck me with both relief and confusion. I was alive. Somehow. I had been given another chance. The next few days were a blur of recovery and disbelief. Doctors came in and out, their faces a mix of awe and curiosity. They kept saying it was a miracle. My vitals had been critical, they were ready to lose me. But then, out of nowhere, everything turned around. They didn't have an explanation, but I did. I knew what had happened, even if I couldn't put it into words. I learned later that while I had been floating between worlds, my daughter had refused to give up on me. She'd snuck into my hospital room with her guitar, a habit she'd long since let go of, and started playing. Her faith, her music, her love, it had all been a vessel for something greater. The nurses told me that as she played, my vitals began to stabilize. "She brought you back," one of them said. But I knew it wasn't just her. It was God, working through her, reminding me of the love that had always surrounded me, even when I hadn't noticed it. Coming back to life wasn't as simple as waking up. My body felt foreign, like I was inhabiting someone else's skin. Every movement was a struggle, every breath a reminder of how close I had come to losing it all. But the hardest part wasn't the physical pain, it was the weight of what I had experienced. I had seen the other side. I had felt the presence, the interconnectedness, the love that bound everything together. And now I was here, back in the world, trying to make sense of it all. The memories were vivid at first, like scenes etched into my mind. But as the days went by, they started to fade. The clarity I had felt in that other realm was slipping away, replaced by the fog of daily life. It was frustrating, even heartbreaking. I wanted to hold on to everything I had seen and felt. I wanted to carry it with me, to live it fully. But the veil was descending, just as the presence had warned. It wasn't a punishment, it was necessary. The full weight of those truths was too much for a human mind to bear. Still, the essence of what I'd learned remained, like a quiet flame burning within me. The hardest part of returning wasn't the recovery or the fading memories, it was the questions. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Friends, family, even strangers asked me to explain the unexplainable. What was it like? Josh, one of my closest friends, asked when he came to visit. Did you see the light? Were there angels? What did it feel like to be, gone? I wanted to tell him everything. But where could I even begin? How could I describe the tunnel, the presence, the life review? How could I explain the interconnectedness I had seen, the ripples of every action, the love that had filled every corner of that infinite space? It's hard to put into words. I finally said, it wasn't like anything here. It was everything. Light, love, connection. I met someone. I think it was God. Josh's eyes widened, and for a moment, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. Do you think it was real? Or, just your brain playing tricks? It was real, I said firmly. More real than this. Not everyone believed me. Some nodded politely, their skepticism barely hidden. Others dismissed it outright, calling it a hallucination or a side effect of the trauma. At first, their disbelief hurt. How could they not see the truth? How could they dismiss something so profound? But then I remembered what the presence had told me, not everyone is ready to hear these truths. The veil is necessary. It wasn't my job to convince anyone. It was my job to live in a way that reflected what I had learned. As I began to regain my strength, I noticed changes in myself. The world seemed brighter, sharper, as if I was seeing it for the first time. Colors were more vivid, sounds more resonant. But it wasn't just my senses that had changed, my perspective had shifted. Too, I could feel the emotions of others in a way I never had before. It wasn't just empathy, it was an awareness that went deeper. Like I was tuned into a frequency I hadn't known existed. One day, a nurse walked into my room with a warm smile, asking how I was feeling. But beneath her cheerful demeanor, I sensed something heavy, a sorrow she was trying to hide. "You're grieving," I said softly, surprising even myself. Her smile faltered, and her eyes filled with tears. "My brother," she whispered. "He passed away last week." I didn't know how I knew. I just did. I didn't have any profound words to offer her, but I held her hand and let her cry. And in that moment, I understood something the presence had shown me. Even the smallest acts of kindness matter. Every connection, every gesture of love, sends ripples through the world. The first steps back into my old life were the hardest. The things that had once seemed important, my career, my success, the applause, felt hollow now. I couldn't go back to the way things were, but I didn't know how to move forward either. The truths I had seen felt too big for this world, too vast for the small routines of daily life. But I knew one thing for sure: I had been given a gift, and it was my responsibility to honor it. Step by step, breath by breath, I began to rebuild not the life I had, but the life I was meant to live. Coming back to life was one thing. Living with the truths I had seen was another. After the accident and my return, the world felt different, more alive, more vivid, but also heavier. Every interaction, every choice seemed to carry weight now, like I could feel the ripples it created. It wasn't overwhelming in the way you might think, it was grounding, humbling. I saw everything through a new lens, one that made me realize just how connected we all are. At the same time, the life I'd built before my career, my routines, the relentless chase for success felt like a coat that no longer fit. I didn't want to go back to the way things were, but I wasn't sure how to move forward either. The first real test came when I stepped back into my work. The bright lights, the stage, the cameras, all the things I had once thrived on now felt shallow, like echoes of a person I no longer recognized. Don't get me wrong, I still love to perform, to make people laugh, to tell stories. But something was missing. The drive to be the best, to dominate the room, had faded. It was no longer about me, it couldn't be. The clarity I'd gained in that other space didn't disappear, but it clashed with the world I returned to. One evening, I sat in a production meeting, listening to people argue over trivial details. A question echoed in my mind: does this matter? Not in a dismissive way, but in a deeper sense. Were these choices adding anything meaningful to the world? Or were they just noise? I started noticing patterns in the people around me. A colleague might come in with a sharp tone, snapping at everyone in their path. Before, I'd have snapped back, defending my ego. Now, I saw the fear behind their words, the insecurity they were trying to mask. I realized that their actions weren't about me, they were about them. And in understanding that, I found patience I didn't know I had. I also began to sense things about people that I couldn't explain. It was as if I'd been tuned into a frequency I'd never noticed before. I could feel emotions lingering in the air, like a hum beneath the surface. One day, during a rehearsal, I noticed one of the musicians, a talented young woman, seemed off. Her performance was flawless, but there was a tension in her movements, a heaviness in her expression. I pulled her aside afterward. "You okay?" I asked. She hesitated, then forced a smile. "Yeah, I'm fine." But I could feel the weight of something unsaid. "Listen," I said gently. "You don't have to tell me anything. Just know I'm here if you need someone to talk to." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked like she might cry. She didn't say much, just nodded, but I could tell it mattered. That was another thing the presence had taught me. Sometimes it's not about fixing someone's pain. Sometimes it's just about being there. As I continued to navigate my new reality, I began to understand what the presence had meant when it showed me the interconnectedness of everything. Every choice we make, every word we speak, sends ripples through the world. It's not just the big actions that matter, it's the small ones. The ones we don't think twice about. A smile to a stranger, a moment of kindness, a word of encouragement, they all add up, weaving the tapestry of our shared existence. I started living more intentionally. I reached out to people I'd lost touch with, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I called my mom just to tell her I loved her. I apologized to friends I'd hurt in the past, not expecting anything in return. I even started helping strangers when I could. Small things like holding a door open or offering a kind word. Each act felt like adding a thread to that tapestry, strengthening the connections that hold us all together. Not everyone understood the changes in me. Some of my old friends drifted away, uncomfortable with the quieter, more introspective version of Jamie Foxx. "You've changed," one of them said during a rare night out. "You're not as sharp anymore." At first, their words stung. Was I losing myself? Was I becoming less of who I was? But then I remembered what the presence had shown me. You're not defined by your achievements or your image. You're defined by how you connect with others. The people who stayed, the ones who embraced this new version of me, were the ones who mattered most. One day, I visited a community center in the city, a place where I could give back in a way that felt real. They didn't care about my fame or my resume. They just needed help. Whether it was organizing supplies or mentoring kids who didn't have anyone else to look up to. At first, I felt out of place, like I didn't belong in this new role. But as I spent more time there, I found a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. The laughter of children, the gratitude of the staff, the quiet sense of purpose. It was healing in a way that no stage or camera ever could be. The hardest part of living with these truths wasn't the work or the changes, it was the doubts. Some days, I questioned whether I was doing enough, whether I was strong enough to carry the weight of what I'd been shown. The world's pain felt overwhelming at times, like a storm I couldn't escape. But every time I felt that way, I remembered the presence, the love it had shown me, the interconnectedness it had revealed, and I knew I had to keep going. The biggest lesson I learned was this: the purpose of life isn't to chase perfection or glory. It's to create connection, to weave threads of love and kindness into the fabric of existence. That's what I strive to do now, one small act at a time, trusting that those ripples will reach farther than I'll ever see. Life after the accident wasn't a straight path, it was more like an unmarked trail, winding through terrain I'd never traveled before. Some days, I felt completely aligned with the truths I'd been shown, like I was walking hand in hand with purpose. Other days, I stumbled, weighed down by doubts and the old patterns of a life I no longer fit into. But no matter how hard it got, I kept hearing the voice of the presence echoing in my mind: "You're not supposed to be here yet. There's more for you to do." The world didn't change to match the clarity I'd found in the presence. It was still chaotic, loud, and filled with suffering. But I had changed. I couldn't see people the same way anymore. Everyone I passed, a stranger on the street, a barista at the coffee shop, a driver honking in traffic, felt like a part of the tapestry I'd been shown. I couldn't ignore them, couldn't pretend we weren't connected. This awareness wasn't always easy. One morning, I was walking through the city and saw a man sitting on the curb, a tattered sign reading, "Anything helps." He was hunched over, shoulders pulled tight against the cold. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure of what to do. I didn't have much cash on me, and I didn't want to offer empty words. But then I remembered the presence and the ripples it had shown me. Every small action matters. I walked over, sat down next to him, and smiled. "Hi," I said gently. "What's your name?" For a moment, he looked at me like I was speaking another language. Then his face softened. "Eric," he said quietly. We talked for a while about his struggles, his hopes, the twists of life that had brought him to that curb. I didn't have solutions for him, but I didn't need to. I just listened. And when I left, I felt like we'd both gained something. That's the thing about connection, it goes both ways. As I rebuilt my life, I found myself drawn to music again. Not as a performer, but as a vessel. My daughter and I began playing together more often. Her guitar, the same one she'd used to bring me back, became a bridge between us. It was a reminder of the love that had pulled me through, the thread that connected us even in my darkest moment. One evening, we sat together in the living room, her guitar in her hands, me at the piano. She started strumming softly, and without thinking, I joined in. The melody was simple, but it felt profound, like a conversation between two souls. When we finished, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I always knew we'd play together one day," she said. "Even when you were in the hospital, I could see it." Her words hit me like a wave. She had carried that vision, that faith, even when I couldn't. And now, here we were, living it. The more I embraced these moments of connection, the more I felt a sense of alignment with the truths I'd been shown. Life wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping changes, it was about showing up every day for the people and moments that mattered. It was about choosing love, even when it was hard. I started sharing my story not in a preachy way, but in a way that invited others to reflect on their own lives. Some people listened with wide eyes, captivated by the details of the other side. Others dismissed it as a hallucination or the ramblings of someone who had been too close to death. But it didn't matter. The presence had taught me that the veil was necessary, that not everyone was ready to hear these truths. My job wasn't to convince anyone. It was simply to live in a way that reflected what I'd learned. Over time, the connections I formed began to ripple outward. At the community center where I volunteered, I watched as the kids I mentored started to believe in themselves. One of them, a shy boy named Marcus, had a natural talent for drawing but never thought it was worth pursuing. After weeks of encouragement, he finally showed me his sketches. They were incredible, raw, emotional, alive. "You've got something special," I told him. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He beamed, his confidence growing a little stronger each time we spoke. Watching him step into his potential felt like seeing the ripples I'd been shown in the presence. The way one kind word could change the course of a life. There were still hard days. Of course. Days when the weight of the world's pain felt unbearable. When I questioned whether I was strong enough to carry the truths I'd been given. But every time I felt like giving up, I remembered the presence. The light. The interconnectedness of it all. I remembered that even in the darkest moments, there is always love. Always hope. One night, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker like stars, I felt a deep sense of peace. I didn't have all the answers. I still had doubts. Still faced challenges. But I knew I was on the right path. The presence had told me I wasn't supposed to be here yet. That there was more for me to do. And now, I understood what that meant. It wasn't about achieving greatness or leaving a legacy. It was about being present. About showing up for the people in my life. About weaving threads of love and connection into the tapestry of the world. My journey is far from over. In fact, I don't think it ever will be. Life isn't about reaching a destination, it's about the steps we take along the way. The choices we make. The ripples we create. I'm not perfect. I'm still learning. Still growing. But for the first time, I feel like I'm truly living. And that's enough. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith.